arched roofs supported. So it's possible that actually these were individual temples, perhaps devoted to gods in the Urartian pantheon. Again, we're not quite sure, but temple palaces such as what we saw at Tel Halaf are also known from the period. These are important for a number of reasons. For one, these are the first columned halls that we actually find in Iran, and have a direct connection to later what we'll see during the Achaemenid period, when columned halls and palaces become tremendously important at places like Persepolis. But we'll get to that. But just keep that in mind as we sort of move forward in terms of columned halls in Iran. Some of the finds from these palaces or temples are equally enigmatic. We do have evidence of administration. Steatite cylinder seals, which are very similar to Assyrian cylinder seals, and also objects that are traveling great distances, such as this offering bowl from Egypt. This is called the lion bowl. It's made out of frit, a form of faience, and as you can see, it's covered with gold leaf. So really attesting to the wealth of the city of Hassanlu during the 9th century. One of the most spectacular finds from Hassanlu is this gold vessel. I'm sorry, it's not a color image, but you'll have to imagine this gold vessel. As you can see, it's decorated in relief, again, being hammered from the back. It's done in this local Hassanlu style. And you can see here that the scenes are primarily what we believe to be mythological scenes. There are two rough registers here, not exactly clearly defined, but in the top, right, we again see divinities, probably, again, these local divinities, storm gods. We'll talk about the gods in a moment. Being brought forth in chariots, led by bulls, so bull iconography, and these particular headdresses, solar deities, and then horned headdresses for other divinities. Also, processions, right? Ritual processions. You see these two guys who are bringing sheep forward, and it's not on this slide or here, but you can see they're actually being led by what appears to be a priest figure carrying a cup. So perhaps sacrifices being made for the temple. And below, an entire hodgepodge of just different scenes of goddesses standing on animals, which we're familiar with from the southern Levant. Scenes of heroes, monsters, conquest, contests of strength. Probably again these images, which are very particular to Hassanlu and Urartu. Probably scenes from mythology we see on this cup. We can compare that to another vessel which was found at Hassanlu, probably dating a little bit later. And this vessel is actually made out of silver. It's a combination of silver and electrum. Anybody know what electrum is? Yeah.
Silver and gold alloy.
Yeah, silver and gold in places like Sinai are often found mixed together in this alloy known as electrum. You can also produce electrum too, but primarily it's a combination of silver and gold. So this is a silver beaker which is inlaid with electrum. But you can see here that this iconography, while the style is very similar, right, to what we see in this gold cup at Hassanlu. Right, these are found side by side. In fact, this one was actually found wrapped up in a cloth and dates to the time of destruction. You can see that the iconography is much more clearly ordered, the use of registers and spaces, and again, military conquest scenes. Scenes that really echo what we see at Nimrud, scenes that seem to be drawing on Neo-Assyrian images of power and domination. So definite contacts between Hassanlu and Assyria during this time. I should also say that that this beaker, it was wrapped up in a cloth and found with the bodies of 3 men. It seems that around 800, this entire area was burned to the ground and destroyed. Right, we've seen destructions before. We've seen destructions at places like Ugarit, but at Ugarit, it seems as though the residents had a little bit of foreknowledge that the Sea Peoples were coming, possibly the Sea Peoples, were coming and destroying the city. Also, it's possible it was destroyed by an earthquake. But regardless, no bodies were found. In the case of Hassanlu, this is not the case. Hassanlu was definitely destroyed by people. There's evidence of this burning which took place, evidence of weaponry, and 280 bodies were actually excavated in and around this complex. People that died in the conflagration, people who were actually trying to save precious objects such as this silver beaker, but unfortunately didn't make it out in time. So these city-states, again, from the 9th to the 7th century, undergo this process of confederation and end up fighting one another. We see, particularly around Lake Van, the coalescence of this kingdom known as Urartu, again in the Syrian text, probably referred to as the Haldini locally. Again, we don't have many texts that come from this area, local ones. A lot of what we know comes from these Assyrian sources. The Haldini perhaps being linked to their main god, the god Haldi, who we'll encounter in a moment. But the destruction of Hassanlu around 800, we have reason to think that it actually was not the Assyrians who destroyed it, that actually it was probably a destruction that took place during the establishment of this Urartian state, which again by 780 or so has come to power in the north. Let's see. A few of the traits of this Urartian state, or series of states, actually, Shalmaneser III refers to it as a land of 8 peoples. So again, a confederation of these city-states. Some of the traits. For one thing, again, we should point out that the region is very, very harsh. It's a mountainous terrain with very hot summers, very cold winters. However, it's easily defended with the terrain. Fortifications are key to Urartian sites. Typically, they're situated on the top of very steep ridges, as you can see here. This is right on the edge of Lake Van, as you can see here, they're just absolutely massive constructions, constructions that use Cyclopean architecture, similar to what we saw at Hattusis, these large blocks of stone which are fitted one into the other, dressed stone, to make a very strong and impenetrable fortification with a series of walls surrounding it. You can actually see this. This is the site of Toprakale, and we see images of what these fortifications would have looked like, also in bronze reliefs from the same region. And you can see the advantage here. Really, the Urartians could strike the Assyrian heartland. They could mount an army during the summertime, travel to the south, strike Assyrian sites, and then just sort of fade into the mountainous regions into the north. They could retreat back up to these fortified locations, like this one at Toprakale, and essentially hold out for the winter. So that's why Shalmaneser III, who says that he has success, again, conquering these people, probably didn't. It's the reason that every year he has to go back and try again, over and over and over again, because he can't hold out in the winter time. So the Urartians, again, were a major thorn in the side of the Assyrians, and again could just fall back to these palaces and these fortifications and just hold out the winter. And the Assyrians really couldn't lay siege to these areas because of the harsh winters. We also find in these fortifications massive pithoi. If you remember those huge vessels from Hattusis, similar pithoi at these sites in Urartu that would have been used for storage and distribution, but also have the additional function of storing food for a siege. So if you are under siege by Shalmaneser III, you have plenty of food to just wait out the winter months, and he has to go back home. In addition, also we see irrigation projects, these architecture and then also irrigation to bring water to these sites. And the Assyrians write about Urartian architecture with a tremendous amount of admiration. Right, so, I should also say wine too. Urartu is also famous for its wine. The Assyrians love it, they drink it, and when they conquer a city, they talk in depth about destroying the vineyards, salting the earth so that the vineyards of the Urartians will never grow again. So sort of symbolically destroying this commodity that, in many ways is sort of emblematic of life, this luxury crop that we've talked about quite a bit. So Urartians are known for their wine too. Primarily, again, what we know comes from inscriptions, these Assyrian inscriptions, some Urartian inscriptions. The Urartian language seems to be linked to Hurrian, which again, right, is our sort of ancestral base for the Mitanni in the Late Bronze Age. Also, the religion seems to be related to the Hurrians. We see these gods like Teshub, Tesheba, and others. It's only written down in the 8th and 7th century, and even then only in very short inscriptions. We only have about 300 or so of these Urartian inscriptions. And one of the most famous and important Urartian inscriptions is known as the Kelishon Stele. And this is a bilingual text which was written both in Urartian and in Assyrian. And this stele actually has quite a bit of history to it. It sort of has a curse, actually, that's attached to it. In 1827, Friedrich Edward Schultz, a German professor, was sent to Lake Van on behalf of the Oriental Society. And he discovered this stele, which, again, was written both in Assyrian and also in this unknown language, which turned out to be Urartian. He copied the text down, but unfortunately, before he could really get it transcribed and work on it, he and his servants were murdered by Kurds near Baskale. His notes were later recovered and published in Paris, but only in later years. So the stele was known, and several expeditions were sent to it. It's in a very remote region, in a very dangerous region, a region that remains unsettled to this day. Henry Creswick Ralston attempted to copy the inscription of the Kelishon stele several years later. However, when he arrived, it was during the winter, and the stele was completely encased in a block of ice. So he was unable to copy it at that time. A few years later, another German scholar by the name of Roche made a similar attempt, but everyone in his party was attacked and killed. In the 1840s, Austin Henry Layard, who we've met before, examined a number of these vessels and tried to make it to the Kelishon stele, did not copy it down. By 1891, still having trouble, Waldemar Belk made it to the site, but again was attacked by Kurds and barely escaped with his life. And this just kind of goes on and on and on. We have scholars in 1938, 1940, who end up doing a lot of excavations in Urartu. They board a ship, which is promptly torpedoed by the Germans. And then finally in the late 1960s, a number of these sites are being excavated. It wasn't until 1976 that an Italian team led by Mirjo Salvini was able to get to the Kelishon stele, accompanied by a heavy military escort, and actually create a squeeze of this. So I mean, it was translated and worked on throughout these years, but really, but a lot of the later work has come quite a bit, a long period since its actual discovery. So what does it say? I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. No.